Welcome to the Hope for Parents with Struggling Teens podcast. I'm Brandon Jaffe. Join us as we explore relationship and mental health issues by weeding out the trends in the mental health industry to uncover what truly works in improving our emotional well-being and relationships. At Inspired Resolutions Counseling, we specialize in providing interventions and resources for families with teens, focusing on topics such as teen mental health, parenting challenges, and family dynamics.
This episode is a recording of the Hope for Parents with Struggling Teens group. The voices of the participants have been edited out for confidentiality purposes.
I had this totally lax week. I had this horrible parenting decision that some of you would probably, like if you saw the chaos with this firework, would have been like, this guy is helping other parents. Good Lord. I made this decision to let my child eat too much candy, stay up one night till like really late. I don't even want to say how late. I asked myself, am I being honest about the tendencies in my child? Am I being honest about my tendencies? Why? Why am I making this decision? Why was I lax? Was I lax for my own personal desires completely and totally? Some of it definitely was. Was I lax because I thought it through? No, I didn't fully think it through. But then I felt good about some of these decisions. And I actually ended up having some conversations with my daughter about, hey, these are special occasions, right? Kind of prepping her for, this is not how it's going to be type thing. I found myself asking, what has the past looked like when I have pushed it with her in terms of sleep? What has actually happened? When I have allowed things to be lax, what has happened? So this wasn't just like the one-off. There's been other times where individually I just kind of put everything into one few day thing and holiday and really let things go wild for a little while. And it turned out well. She was in a good mood. She's not like this super compliant child. She's kind of half compliant, half defiant. But that led me to this question of, am I being honest about myself? Am I being honest about my child? And I think that I'm going to have to ask that question at every stage of the game, if not on a daily basis. What has the past told me? And I think what happens is, for a lot of the families I've worked with that are really, really struggling, there are these patterns of, I think it could be better in this way if I just keep up this one behavior. Well, maybe it'll change if I. Instead of, this is what I've experienced and this is what I'm going to accept about the family dynamics, about the dynamics of my child. And I think admitting that can be hard for some parents. I think that, there are some children out there who they should never stay up too late because the chaos they cause is too great. I think that there are some children out there who are not going to eat healthy if you let them binge for a couple of days on really unhealthy things. I think that there are some teens out there who, when you don't follow through with the boundaries even one time, it isn't going to go well for many, many weeks. I think that there are some other teens out there who, when you're figuring out the boundaries or you're trying different things out, they don't get thrown totally off. I felt convicted to encourage everybody at the group to really ask yourself, hey, am I being honest about myself? Am I being honest about my children? My young children, older children, or even adult children? And I don't know what patterns we might come up with, but I'm gonna try and get everybody almost to chime in. And so I want you to really think about some of the patterns. I'm bringing up examples of a 5-year-old. We have a cooking channel together, and food and healthy food is a constant conversation. And if I let her binge and have too many popsicles one day, I don't mind doing the work that it takes to get her corrected for a few days. In fact, I enjoy that process, even if she cries, even if she is angry, right? I'll take that one little temper tantrum because I know it's not going to last. And I know I can handle that without getting angry. You might be a parent who's like, hey, if I let this go, I'm going to resent the consequences that happen for me to correct that in the family. And so one thing we've got to be honest about is our anger and our resentment. How do I respond when it's difficult to get my family back on track? Staying up too late. I'm okay with the consequences of her staying up too late. I had the freedom because I had days off to rearrange things to make up for it. If she was a little grumpy, I'm going to take that responsibility. I know that I'm not going to keep that up because I know in the long term that's going to not be good for her. But the connection and the family time and the things that came because of that outweighed what I believed the consequences to be. And you know, so I said, I was willing to take responsibility for the consequences. I think a lot of times we as parents are making decisions with our kids regarding boundaries, regarding, certain things that we just don't want to have the hard discussion with them, or we don't want them to be mad at us, or we don't want to deal with the hard argument in the moment. What happens is we don't think through and take accountability before, hey, this is a decision I'm making, therefore there's going to be this consequence later on, even though they're the ones causing the consequence, right? Being honest about the patterns, being honest about what goes down in the dynamics that you were given. It's important to be honest about your temperament, their responses to certain things, honest about what you actually control, honest about what you don't control, honest about personalities. To be a part of a certain social group, we have to deal with certain weird personalities that kind of put us off. We'll deal with it, right? We'll just kind of admit to ourselves, this is how this person is. We'll move on, and it's fine. But isn't it funny that we're not honest about both our personalities and our children's personalities as we navigate walking alongside them? Whose personality do you think parents have the most trouble with accepting and being honest about? Their own. Parents, I'm realizing, have a really hard time being honest about their own personality. In recovery, they call it character defects. I know that's like a horrible term. But all the stuff, the social issues you might have had your entire life, parents will act like that doesn't exist anymore. You knew it did. You never really, and some of you admitted it and took responsibility for it, and some of you just pretend like it never happened. And then your child is growing up and navigating their own personalities, and they've got their own personality strengths and their own personality difficulties. Some of it irks you, and some of it makes you proud. And isn't that interesting? Being honest about your own personality, your own character defects, your own child's personality, your own child's character defects. And once you admit to these things, then you've got to make decisions about how you're going to react, what you're going to do. What does that mean now that you're admitting and being honest about yourself and the dynamics between you two? If you've had a strained relationship for 10 years with your child, and you're like, I did the work and I've gone to therapy, I'm good now, I'm not angry anymore, and they're not even seeing it, well, you're not being honest about how long it would take for you to trust and see that in somebody else. I don't think that we're honest about some of our behaviors and the gravity to which it has affected our children. I was having a discussion with somebody the other day, and they said, I never yell at my children. What you're teaching, Brandon, doesn't apply to me. I said, do you ever yell around your children? Well, yeah. This was unfair because, no offense if anybody's a coach, but I was talking to a coach, and it's kind of like 99.9% of the time, if I'm talking to a coach who has been coaching for a long time, they yell and they're intense and they don't think it's yelling and they don't think that it's intense. When this person finally sat and thought about it and admitted, wow, they're a yeller. They are a reactor in the car. They are angry over here. At least they behave angry, even though it doesn't affect them. Oh my gosh, okay, now they were able to start seeing something. So sometimes when you're truly honest about yourself, you almost have to take a stance outside yourself. You can't see yourself through your own lens of you. You've got to see yourself with through a lens almost without context. Because a lot of the people around us are experiencing us through a lens without context. Even if they know the excuses, even if they know your history, or they've lived with you their whole lives, they are still experiencing you through the lens of no context that you give yourself. For us to be honest about ourselves and how we affect the people around us, you got to take that context away. I cannot be truly honest with myself. I understand that your friends, your family have all the context. I know they do. Your assumption is that that they are experiencing you through that context and that lens. They're not. That's what I'm telling you. You've probably been living your life this whole time as kind of frustrated, like, you know what I've been through. How are you getting on me right now? No, I'm telling you that at the end of the day, their central nervous system, their automatic thoughts, the damage that gets done, it gets done through this experience where the context isn't playing a role. Therefore, if you want to be truly honest about how you affect the people around you, if you want to be truly honest about your presence, you've got to take the context away. A child who knows that his mom just yells all the time because that's how she grew up, and this is actually way better than it was earlier. Oddly enough, that isn't mitigating the damage that it's doing on a subconscious level to that child. They might be able to say, oh, no, my mom's fine. It's okay. It's not a big deal. They might even be able to talk in therapy with the context and tell themselves it's fine. It's okay. There's still damage being done. So everybody sit with that for a minute. I don't know where you're going to go with this. I went a lot of different directions. Who's willing to start? What's an example recently of a subject that you were passionate about? I'm going to turn this so upside down, and Mom is not going to like this one bit. When you have a child or a spouse or another loved one who's in recovery, there are signs that they're truly in recovery. And some of it's, are they going to their meetings? Are they working with a sponsor? And there are signs that they are not in recovery. If they are incessantly saying that they want to use, I got to drink, this is what addicts do, that's not a sign of I'm in recovery. I hate to say it. And I think you're sensing it based on just what I know of you, and you have become incredible. The work that you have done has brought you from being a yeller to having a great relationship with your child. And you've got boundaries and you're not willing to give money. And that's awesome. You have come the whole way that you need to in terms of your relationship with him. In terms of just kind of solace and being able to walk alongside an addict, one thing that you've got to understand is when they have that rhetoric, that's an insane conversation. You being passionate about that is you recognizing, oh my gosh, something feels off with this person. And so while I don't want you to have that insane conversation, I want you to feel like you should be able to express yourself to them. You said he's sensitive. No. He's sensitive to being called out, but he was at a party with alcohol and Coke and whatever else was there, and he's a gambler, and we know what the casinos look like. We know what the poker card games look like. We know who he's hanging out with, going to concerts. You see, he's not so sensitive that he can't participate in all these things, and we know that he's been through recovery. Right? So there's all these signs that he can take feedback, but what I bet he can't take is when he's in the mode of not participating in recovery, truly in his heart, truly admitting that he has a problem. He doesn't want anybody to reflect that back to him. That's what you experienced, in my opinion. The way you displayed just now, how you spoke to him, was totally reasonable. As parents, I don't want you to become micromanagey of yourself. Don't micromanage them and don't micromanage yourself, and don't have unrealistic expectations for mood. I need to tone it down when I get frustrated with people. I'm gonna have to work on that the rest of my life. But you don't get to tell me that I don't get to be angry and express anger. We will all experience that from somebody who doesn't want to be confronted. I have never said don't act angry. Never said that. I will never teach that to anybody. I will never say don't speak passionately when your child is literally telling you, I'm going to drink and use again, chill out. And they just got out of a program and they have caused so much havoc and so much money to go down the drain. No, you get to speak passionately. Now, if you yell or you put them down or you continue the insane conversation, in other words, you're repeating yourself, that's when it's time to take responsibility. Not for them, though. You're taking responsibility for that for yourself because you don't deserve to participate in insane conversations. That's bringing their chaos to your being. Slips are, I was doing what I needed to do. I had a momentary just kind of lapse. I had an emotional reaction. That's what we call a full-blown relapse. That's why I'm using that language. He was not participating in recovery in that moment. That is not a slip. Slips are very minor. Over the last 20-something years that I've been involved in the community, I know everybody has their language, but when you're describing a slip, you're describing this momentary lapse, but you were doing all the things, your mindset hadn't changed, and you just kind of found yourself like, oh my gosh, I can't believe I did this. When somebody is speaking like, oh, well, I got to go to these country concerts, and they're only 10 months in, that's called denial. You see, slips don't involve denial. Now, this isn't just for addiction. This is any kind of growth and recovery type process. Slips are much different than full-blown relapse where you're in denial, the justification comes back, you're lying to yourself, you're trying to manipulate things around you, you're seeking it out. It's much different. He doesn't get to live a normal life. He has no business being at a concert. He has no business going to a pool party for the 4th of July like that. Right now, at this early stage of recovery, the fact that he's even thinking I'm going to test things out is absolutely bonkers. An addict truly in recovery has to grieve the idea that they're ever going to live a normal life. Now, I'm not saying their life eventually, for some addicts, doesn't get like that where they can go to, let's say, business party and have the club soda, right? And be the one who doesn't drink and it's not that big a deal, but he's 21 years old. No, he's not going to be able to go to bars and be okay. Not ever. Not the way 21-year-olds do. No, he's not going to be able to go to the raging pool party, right? And I say that and people will argue with me. But there are some true and tried facts about somebody who's truly an addict trying to be in recovery, who has gone past, if you've ever seen my graph, into the 3 and 4 range. No, they can't participate in that stuff. I've had therapists who have worked for me who just couldn't wrap their mind around that. A really good addiction therapist, often in their career, gets told that they're like clairvoyant or something. But we're not. We just know what the patterns look like. And I'm telling you that because for you, from here on out, that conversation with him is not going to be a healthy one. He has some major grieving and letting go to do. He wants a normal 21-year-old, 20s. He wants a very specifically normal, which is the Orange County party kids experience as a 21-year-old. Not realizing that most of the population does not live that life ever. That's not a thing, which is something else he's in denial about. That that's a right, that that's a necessity, that there's no life outside of it. That there's no 21-year-olds living that life. The thing is there are no 21-year-olds that he wants to be with or that want to be with him. Most 21-year-olds aren't going out like that, believe it or not. I know it seems like they are, right, if you look on social media, but that's just not reality. Did you see sometimes being honest about yourself and your child takes you places that you never would think? Sometimes you really got to dig deep. Sometimes you think, oh yeah, I'm being totally honest. And if you get to that point, find somebody to challenge you. Who's willing to go next? Her son got a job, then lost a job because he didn't check his phone. And at first, he's thinking and mom's thinking, oh my gosh, you know what? This is this boss's fault, didn't call. And then lo and behold, probably mom had this gut feeling, I bet my son missed out on something. And lo and behold, he made a mistake. Instead of attacking and making her son feel bad, instead of using it as a moment to pounce once again and say, you should have done this, what's wrong with you? She waited, which I love, and made one small comment about, hey, sleeping during the day and being up at night might create some of these problems. And he took it well. And I assume he took it well because she's been making some other changes, right? I don't think he would have taken it well if every moment had been riddled with confrontation and confrontation. And so he took it well. And then when she found out it was his fault, she didn't pounce. She stayed quiet. And the way she did that was being honest with herself about herself and her past, which parents don't do. This mom right here said, I've made those mistakes. I've lost a few jobs. A lot of parents would forget about that. They'd make it more important to teach that lesson that they've already taught over and over again instead of just walking alongside their child who's having a difficult moment. Most people have lost lots of jobs. Many people have been late. I know this because I've hired many people. Most people have made a mistake or not paid attention, and young people stay up really, really late. I had this conversation with somebody who's actually very conservative in terms of how he's living his life and struggling to kind of connect with some people. And one of the conversations we had was, he was confused that he couldn't connect with some of his friends because they stay up late and he goes to bed early, and he thought it was just his friends. And I said, I don't think it's just your friends. Have you been on a college campus lately? And I was being facetious because I knew he had. I said, have you ever walked down the street in downtown Orange during school time? Young people stay up really late. Is it good? No. Not going to encourage it. It's interesting talking to all these parents who are baffled at how their kids stay up late at night, because some of these same parents will come into me for individual work and be like, hey, I can't sleep all night long. Or their spouses are like, this yahoo's up all night watching TV and I'm just trying to sleep. That's like one of the huge arguments for couples. And then if I ask you about your college time and you went to a 4-year college, you were up really late. You're up for Thirsty Thursday and Taco Tuesday, and is it good? No, there's a balance, though, in it. If I'm honest about young people, they stay up really late at night and they like to sleep during the day. We should try to encourage other things, but why are we acting so baffled? Back to what you did, you took accountability for your own life and you connected. I know what it's like to lose some jobs that I shouldn't have lost. That's awesome. That's what I'm talking about. Being honest, taking accountability. We're going to come back to us being honest about ourselves, our situations, and our children. And I'd like somebody to talk about being honest about your child, accepting something about your child that's important. I want to comment on this note I made. I keep saying that we need to allow our children to fail. And, when we fail, it's we either didn't have what it takes to do something, right? We didn't have all the resources or knowledge or whatever it is, or we made a mistake and we fail. But there's another piece to that, and I hope I remember to start using this. We often need to allow our children not only to fail, but experience adversity. Experiencing something adverse means that it wasn't your fault. It was probably unjust and not fair. And isn't it interesting that we constantly will micromanage? Does anybody know the relationship first that gets micromanaged to make it fair and just and correct? And man, parents will exhaust themselves. They will exhaust their marriages. They will exhaust their finances trying to mitigate this relationship so that their child doesn't experience something unfair or adverse. Sibling relationship. We are going to make it all fair, equal, same amount of money, same amount of experiences. At this age, you can do this, and at this age, you can do this, and you're going to be exactly the same, right? Instead of just having a relationship with your children. You know what? Sometimes your children have a really bummer of a sibling and walk alongside them in that adversity instead of trying to fix it all for them. I'm not saying there should be no attempt to balance things out. I get, right? There's a balance in that, but it's something to think about. I don't think it's just failure that we walk alongside them. It's also that those adverse experiences that they're having. Who else? Who else is willing to share a response to this honesty, this brutal honesty about yourself, your situation, or your child? Because I appreciate you sharing the difficult topic. The way it looks in my room is I get a phone call. My daughter is, off the rails. And then by the time they get into the intake, all they want to bring up is don't have sex and get on birth control. And, with certain cultures and families, this is something that some parents won't even have the discussion. There are so many topics that we can all kind of agree on, and then there are some of those topics that really get scary, have a clash of morals and values, have a clash of thoughts, and then politics and everything else. And so I appreciate you being courageous enough to bring this up, because a lot of the parents that come through our center are going to have this conversation. And it's so interesting because it's on different levels, right? A lot of parents are just going to want to have the conversation about sex, anger. You're not going out. You can't do this, buckling down. And then over here across the street, we don't want to have the conversation. We know you're going to do stuff. We're going to close our eyes. And then you have some parents who are just so shut down that they're talking about something else over here instead of the issue at hand. And so I implore you, if you're somebody who's really struggling with this issue with your child, get help to have the conversation. Don't ignore it. And then there's the different levels. Sex conversation, pill conversation, shot conversation. That becomes sometimes a very impossible, contentious conversation. I have worked with families where because one parent just wanted their child to be safe and if they were going to do it, went to the doctor with them without the other parent knowing, and then it causes risk that can never be fixed. Again, if your family ever struggles with this conversation, the moment you feel, wow, I'm at an impasse, I'm feeling resentment, it's time to get help for the family. You're talking about something very interesting, and you took accountability for it. You were honest about it. You knew what you wanted her to do. You had very specific, and you knew you were right. And it turns out she was right, and she's smiling today because she got what she wanted, and she knew she was right, and this all worked out swimmingly for her. But when our children make decisions, right, and there's so many layers of this. I know you, you know you, why aren't you making a different choice, right? And it's because they think, well, this is a bigger subject and I can be responsible now. A really hard thing to do is when there is something as big a deal as having a baby and having sex and the consequences of these decisions, man, for parents to say it once, maybe twice, and third time's insanity. It's like the ultimate test. She admitted she was on it. She kept saying it. She couldn't let herself stop. And it turns out that she didn't need to keep going because this conversation went the way she wanted it to between her and her daughter and the doctor. Even when your blood's boiling, even when you're like, no, this is too big a deal. I love what Brandon says about once, maybe twice, third time's insanity. However, now we're talking about sex and babies. I get where you want to go, but we didn't come up with these concepts because we don't want you to have a greater influence. We came up with these concepts because when you fall into these patterns, it doesn't work. It works only for the big stuff. In fact, it's less likely to work for the big stuff, scary stuff. I've asked so many times in this group, hey, can anybody give me an example of you just egging them on and continuing to say the same thing over and over again, finally leading to your child going, aha, now I get it. No. I might not be right about this, but there's a chance that had you continued to just get angry and push your daughter, that she could have retreated into a place where she wouldn't even listen to the doctor because no matter what, her resentment and anger at what she's being told is going to lead her to do the opposite of what mom wants. And these are hard conversations. The hard stuff stays the hard stuff. The concepts that are healthy never change. Please hear me on that. Yeah, I was going to say, that's amazing that you guys could even have that conversation. Well, I appreciate you sharing that. Thank you. Who else is willing to share either about being honest about yourself, or we need at least a couple of people to share kind of where you're at in your journey, issues you have, concepts you want me to clarify? This is a hard situation. Mom and dad bring them on a camping trip, I assume, bought the food and paid for everything. And son asks, Dad, can I smoke this joint? Dad says, yes, but ask your mom. And mom's against it. Dad obviously is not. And this is coming up more and more. This dynamic where one parent's okay with smoking weed and the other parent isn't okay with it is rampant. I'm hearing about this almost on a weekly basis. One thing we've got to be honest about is the nature and the belief about marijuana has completely changed from when we were younger, whether we agree with it or not. Whether you're conservative or liberal in this stance, the fact is it is seen as less harmful, whether you agree with it or not, than alcohol. Again, I am not giving my opinion on it right now in any way, shape, or form. I speak on it when I speak about drugs. However, this dynamic of one parent saying, yes, it's okay, but go ask the parent who's going to say no, is a lose all the way around situation. Now, some of you shaking your heads are going, yeah, and I'm the parent that's the bad guy all the time, and I get that. And I wish I had this really huge, awesome script to tell you the spouse who's more permissive of this stuff, right? But I don't. And so I turn the parent who struggles with this first to figure out what you have control over. Be honest. This is another situation about being honest about the dynamics. You are married at this point in time to a person who disagrees with your value system. They are teaching a different message to your child than you are. Not saying just go along with them, but we have to accept that. That's a really good time to try and get you and your partner into therapy. That's when it's time. When something like that's going down, that's when it's time to ask for help. I think it's easy for people to say, well, the parent who's permissive is bad. The parent who's trying to parent is good. And I'm not saying that's not true. That may be true. That may not be true. I don't know. The parent in this situation, does anybody know which parent has less control? The more conservative parent, the parent who wants to say no. I'm not saying it's right you're in this situation. I'm not saying you're not right about saying no. But you see, by the time this all unfolds, one parent says yes, sets you up, you have a much bigger problem than whether or not your child's going to smoke weed. You've got a problem in the marriage. And saying yes or no right then and there isn't going to be influential. And if I address the obvious issue in front of me, oh, wow, if I pretend like my child sitting in front of me is asking me if they can or they can't, then I'm a fool. So I'm not calling you a fool. Because that's not the issue I'm being presented with right then and there. There is no reason for me to participate in giving permission or not giving permission because I have no control. My child is going to smoke. And they aren't asking me for permission. They are testing me. They're making a stand, letting me know that they disagree with me and their father or their mother on the other side is standing with them. We've got to be honest about what's actually going on. This fits with this honesty about our situation discussion. And this is a hard dynamic. But the truth is, whether she said yes or no, that her child was going to smoke. The truth is, the dynamic was unfair, felt icky, and it was a problem in the marriage. And if I address the pretend conflict, which is, are you going to let me or not let me, then I am being a fool. Therefore, in this situation, my son, who's already gotten permission from the other parent, says, hey, can I smoke? I'm going to say, hey, you know what? I love you, but I don't think you're asking me if you can smoke. We both know you're going to go smoke, and I'm disappointed. And I also know that there's a dynamic that your father and I or your mother and I need to address. Bobby, Billy, Joe, whatever the son's name is, I hope you choose to not smoke. And then I'm going to turn to the girlfriend. I'm not okay with you smoking on our trip. Please don't. And then I'm going to leave it alone. But I'm not going to pretend like there isn't some other situation going on. I'm not going to pretend like you're actually asking if you can smoke or not. You're 15 years old. You know I don't agree with you smoking. You're not asking my permission. You're making a stand right now. And I'm going to address the elephant in the room without yelling, without putting you down. Hey, bud, I love you, but you're not asking me permission. We know you're making a stand. We know that you are proud and happy that your dad's on your side, and you know I'm against this, and we're going to have a family discussion. Of course, I hope you don't smoke. What's that like to hear, you guys? In this case, we have two married people who have different morals. So even setting those boundaries isn't going to be healthy at this point in time. I'm sorry, but you cannot set boundaries regarding certain things if you and your spouse are not on the same page, so to speak. And that's hard to let go. That's hard to grieve. And again, that's a sign, if you're running into that, it's a sign that it's time to ask for help. And then if your spouse refuses to get help or, you're just not in that season, you've got to ask yourself, what do I have control over so that I can navigate in the healthiest way possible? And sometimes I think we turn to professionals, we turn to groups like this, we turn to books and life coaches and everything else that we're turning to and pastors for answers to make things ideal, which comes back to that honesty. Am I being truly honest? Is there an ideal situation I can actually have in the near future? Sometimes we have to admit there's some really difficult realities that I have to accept that I don't have control over. Now it's time to navigate in the happiest way possible, accepting that. And it might be a value system that you don't share with your spouse. That is a really important thing to admit to and accept if you can't change it, right? If you haven't gotten married yet, or if you're doing the premarital work, those core value systems are pretty important to be honest about. But once you have kids and you're in it, it becomes something you have to navigate. How do I navigate parenting with this partner who doesn't share my value system? Will one more person check in for us tonight? Overall, she's more on the light side of things, right? She's not out there doing a whole bunch of drinking usually, right? She's a little more conservative comparatively, right? You're doing a great job. The way you've repaired your relationship with your daughter has been awesome. But I think it's time to take it a next step. I know that for us, 22-year-olds seem like kids. What is a 22-year-old? An adult. These young adults who are acting like young adults are really bothering me. Now, that's a true statement. These kids, I think, are doing the wrong thing. No, they're doing what young adults do. And sometimes we've got to be more honest about where our child is, even if we want them to be younger because they're immature and they can't even, take care of themselves or get a job. I get it. But at the end of the day, I better admit and be honest with myself that my child is 22. And even if I have not forced them to get a job and I'm letting them live off of me while they act immaturely, at the end of the day, a 22-year-old has desires to act like a 22-year-old. They don't want to make friendship bracelets like I do with my 6-year-old. They aren't going to be super happy. Most of them, or many of them, maybe not most of them, they may not all be going to bars and getting wild and crazy, but they're probably going to have some wine, and they're probably going to start, if they weren't already, doing those adult things. And if you're calling them kids, you're doing yourself a disservice. If you mentally have not reminded yourself over and over again, this is a young adult that I'm talking about. It's like total baseball and sports season right now, I think. And I've had some conversations with coaches and about coaches. And I was actually talking to a coach the other day who calls all of his players young adults. And I went, no. You're dealing with a bunch of kids, dude. These aren't young adults. These are 14 and 15-year-olds, my man. And they're acting like 14 and 15-year-olds. And so sometimes we expect and we forget how young our children are. And sometimes we call our children kids when they aren't kids anymore. And so one of the things we can be honest about is what truly is their season of life developmentally. Not what am I experiencing from them because I get in fights with them about cleaning up the garbage and stuff. It's what truly is my child's developmental stage and what are my expectations for that developmental stage? Do they match up? I'm going to leave us all with this. I don't know what areas you all and myself need to be more honest about when it comes to ourselves, but try to find at least 2 or 3 throughout the week and really dig past it, push past the obvious. It might have to do with your personality. It might have to do with character defects. It might have to do with decisions you've made or cultures that you've built in your home. And then be really honest about at least one dynamic between you and your child, a dynamic that's hard for you to remember or see. And then be honest about where your child's at, their tendencies, their stage of life, etc. But I challenge everybody this week to just focus on being totally stripped down, simply honest about yourself, your relationship with your child, and your child. Okay, so thank you, guys.
The Hope for Parents with Struggling Teens podcast is an Inspired Resolutions production. Hosted by Brandon Jaffe. Edited and mixed by Natalie Atkinson. Music by Natalie and Sean Atkinson. Inspired Resolutions Counseling is based in Yorba Linda, California. Whether you're interested in joining our group, seeking therapy services, or exploring more of our resources, you can find us on our website, Instagram, Facebook, or YouTube at Inspired Resolutions Counseling.